If someone had told me that I would end up married to him, I would have laughed out loud, or punched whoever said it in the face. I hated Kaio since the first day of high school. He was cocky, annoying, and loved to tease me. If I raised my hand to answer a question, he made sure to speak louder. If I got a perfect score, he bragged about having gotten one more question right. If I won a competition, he said it was luck. And I, of course, didn't stay quiet. I was never one to take insults lying down. Our rivalry was legendary. Teachers would separate our desks in class. Friends would make bets on who would explode first. And it went on like that for years, a constant crossfire, until school ended. I thought I would never see that idiot again, until, years later, a bureaucratic error, or a Machiavellian plan of the universe, put me in front of him again. I was in the conference room of my father's office, ready to sign some papers, when the door opened and he walked in. Kaio, the same smug smile, the same defiant look. "Tell me this is a nightmare," I blurted out, crossing my arms. "Worse, princess. It's real." He threw the folder on the table and leaned back in his chair. "It looks like we're engaged." Engaged. My heart skipped a beat so hard I felt the blood rush to my face. Number. This had to be a mistake. But it wasn't. The merger agreement for our family companies required a wedding. Mandatory. And our parents, as cold and calculating as the market they dominated, had already planned everything. Kaio laughed lightly, leaning closer to me. "I knew one day you'd end up falling into my arms." I leaned in too, gritting my teeth. "And I knew that one day I would want to strangle you." He smiled. I wanted to slap him. It was official. Destiny hated me. Kaio smiled as if he had won some dirty game. The sparkle in his eyes irritated me so much that I could feel my blood boiling. "Oh, come on. Don't make that face." He tilted his head, analyzing me with that air of unbearable superiority. "You should be happy. I'm a great catch." The laugh that came out of my mouth was almost hysterical. "A great catch? You're the worst thing that could have happened in my life." He put his hand on his chest, feigning exaggerated drama. "Oh, you hurt my feelings like that." I took a deep breath. I wanted to control myself. I wanted to act rationally. But being in the same room as Kaio after so many years rekindled an old anger. All our fights, disputes, and provocations came flooding back as if we had never left school. And now, I was stuck with him. This is ridiculous. I clenched my fists. "I'm not going to marry you." "Then explain this to our parents." He pulled a contract out of his briefcase and threw it on the table. "It seems that if one of us refuses, the companies lose $1 million contract." My mouth went dry. My father never cared much about my opinion, but I knew it meant a lot to him. And damn. I looked at Kaio, who now had a more restrained smile. He didn't want this either. "Do you think I'm happy about this?" He stood up, running his hand through his hair. For the first time, the irritation on his face seemed real. "I hate this idea as much as you do, but have you realized that we have no way out?" He was right. The idea of spending a year, or however long it took, stuck in this marriage sickened me. But the alternative? Giving up everything I'd worked for, disappointing my family, causing a scandal? I threw myself into my chair and pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling the headache coming on full force. Okay. But know that this doesn't change anything. I still hate you." He smiled sideways. That damn smile that always drove me crazy. "The feeling is mutual, princess." The engagement dinner was pure torture. My mother had everything decorated as if it were a royal wedding. Hanging lights, white and gold flowers, impeccable waiters serving champagne. The guests talked as if this engagement was the event of the century, while I tried not to stab Kaio's hand with a fork. "Stop poking me under the table, you idiot," I hissed through my teeth, forcing a smile at the guests. "You're the one stepping on my toes." He took a sip of wine, impassive. I took a deep breath and smiled at an elegant woman in front of us, who was saying something about what a beautiful couple we were. I just wanted the night to end. "Now, let's seal this moment with a photo of the bride and groom," someone announced, and before I could protest, I was pulled to the center of the room. Kaio held my waist as if it were natural. My body stiffened. He was too close. His hand was warm against the thin fabric of my dress, and his scent, woody and intense, invaded my senses. "Relax," he murmured, leaning close to my ear. "Pretend you like me." I wanted to punch him. Instead, I turned my face away, and with a fake smile, whispered, "You fake it very well. Years of practice." The photographer counted to 3, and at the exact moment of the click, Kaio turned his face and pressed a kiss on my cheek. The room exploded in applause and sighs. I smiled for the photo, but I swore that one day I would kill that bastard. The photo of the fake kiss was all over the family's social media the next day. My mother was beaming. My father was pleased. The company partners were more than excited. And me, I wanted to die. "Did you see the comments?" my best friend Julia said over the phone as I packed my suitcase. Unfortunately, yes. Beautiful couple, made for each other. Love always wins. Love Julia. They think I love that idiot. She laughed. And who said that hate and love don't go hand in hand? I threw a blouse into the suitcase with more force than necessary. This is absurd. An arranged marriage in the 21st century. And now there's this other humiliation. What humiliation? I swallowed hard. Let's live together. There was silence on the other end of the line. What? Yeah, I sighed. As part of the agreement, we have to look like a perfect couple. And perfect couples live together. Okay, now this is interesting. Her voice was full of mischief. What's the house like? A luxury apartment. Everything chic, modern, without a hint of my personality. And Kaio? I rolled my eyes. He's arriving tonight. Until then, I can pretend I have peace. The peace didn't last long. I was unpacking my things in the living room when the door opened and Kaio came in, carrying suitcases and with that carefree air that irritated me. Home, sweet home. He threw a suitcase on the couch and looked at me with a teasing smile. "Did you miss me?" I almost died of longing. I grabbed a pillow and threw it at him. He dodged it, laughing. "Wow, we're not even married yet, and you already want to kill me. That's what intense love is." I snorted and crossed my arms. "Look, since we're stuck in this madness, let's establish some rules." "Rules?" He arched his eyebrow. "What kind of rules?" "Like, don't touch my stuff. Don't talk to me before coffee. Don't invite your Barbie friends over. That kind of thing." He laughed, shaking his head. "Oh, come on, princess. Are you jealous? Of you. Not in a million years." He came closer, his eyes shining with amusement. "So what's the problem? Afraid that you'll end up liking me?" I wanted to laugh in his face, but something in the way he looked at me made my stomach turn. It was that old tension from years ago. That spark that I always ignored. "You're lucky that murder is still a crime," I hissed, pushing him away. "Lucky for you that we're in this together." He winked. "Who knows? Maybe you'll find out that I'm the husband of your dreams." I snorted. This was going to be hell. The forced coexistence turned small moments into cold wars. In the morning, we fought over who would use the bathroom first. He would take his time on purpose just to irritate me. In the kitchen, our fights were constant. "You used my special coffee," I accused, holding up the empty package. "So what? Coffee is coffee." "This coffee costs 200 Rs." He widened his eyes. 200? Jesus. I hope it comes with a gold nugget inside. In the living room, we fought over the TV remote. He wanted football. I wanted a series. I got there first. I crossed my arms. I pay for half of this apartment. That gives me the right to 50% of the TV. Then, I'll get the other 50%. Deal. He grabbed the remote and placed it in the middle of the couch. Whoever gets there first gets it. We ran at the same time. We tangled up on the couch, fighting for the remote like two children. And then, out of nowhere, Kaio was on top, holding my wrist tightly. My heart raced. He noticed. His smile disappeared for a second. His eyes dropped to my mouth, and for an instant, a small, cursed instant, I felt my entire body react to the proximity. "You're always so stubborn." His voice was low. I swallowed hard. "And you're always so unbearable." He slowly released me and got off the couch, laughing. I lay there, trying to understand what the hell had just happened. If this was a war, I urgently needed new weapons. I needed new weapons. Ever since Kaio and I started sharing that apartment, the war between us had become a minefield. Small, accidental touches felt like electric shocks. Lingering glances turned into sparks. And the air between us sometimes became so thick that I found it hard to breathe. And that made me furious. "You have a meeting at 3, Kaio announced as he grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. "I know," I replied dryly, without taking my eyes off the laptop. He rested his hip on the counter and took a sip of water, watching me carefully. "You look nervous." "I'm not nervous," he laughed. "You always bite your nails when you're nervous." I looked at my hand, and sure enough, I had my finger between my teeth. I huffed, irritated that he still knew me so well. "It's nothing big, just a new project." "And what is it about this project that keeps you up at night?" I sighed, closing my laptop. There was no way to avoid this conversation. It's important for my career. If I can close this deal, it will be my first major achievement without the influence of my family. He stared at me for a moment, and for the first time since we started this wedding farce, there was no provocation in his eyes. "You'll do it." The conviction in his voice caught me off guard. "How can you be so sure?" He shrugged. "Because you never accept losing." My throat went dry. For a second, I was speechless. He was right. And the way he said it, as if he truly believed in me, made a strange warmth spread through my chest. The meeting was a disaster. The investor rejected my proposal without even giving me a chance to argue. He said he needed someone more experienced to run the project, as if my years of study and dedication meant nothing. I arrived home furious, throwing my bag on the couch. Kaio was in the kitchen and raised an eyebrow when he saw me storm in. By the gods, who dared to anger the beast? Shut up. I walked straight past, going to the cupboard in search of a glass. Oh, so it really was bad. He came closer, leaning against the counter. "Do you want to talk about it? Or would you rather hit someone?" "I'd rather punch you." He laughed, but didn't insist. He just opened the cupboard and took out a bottle of whiskey. "Do you want some?" I hesitated for a second, but then held out the glass. He poured the drink and sat down next to me at the table. "Do you know what the problem with these people is?" he began, swirling the amber liquid in the glass. "They don't know how to recognize talent when they see it. You say it like it's easy." He looked at me. "With you, it always has been." The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. "You're acting weird today." "I'm acting weird every day." "You're different." He laughed, taking a sip of his drink. "Maybe it's because I'm starting to see you in a different light." My heart skipped a beat. "What light?" He rested his elbow on the table and tilted his head, analyzing me. "Before, I saw you as a rival. Now," the pause was unbearable. "Now." My voice came out lower than I would have liked. He smiled, but didn't answer. Instead, he took my hand and ran his thumb over my fingers, which were still marked by my nail-biting habit. "You still do that. I hate you enough. You don't need to analyze me, too." He didn't laugh this time. He just held my hand a little tighter, as if he was trying to record that moment. "You don't hate me that much." I tried to argue, but his gaze held me in place. The tension that had been building between us for the past few weeks reached its peak, and then it happened. Kaio leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull back. But I didn't pull back. I didn't want to. Our lips touched, and the moment it happened, I realized I was completely screwed, because it wasn't just any kiss. It was hot, intense, filled with years of pent-up tension. His hands went to my waist, pulling me closer, and I lost myself. Kaio had always been the storm in my life, and now I was drowning in him. The kiss shouldn't have happened. I knew it. He knew it. But the moment our lips met, all logic vanished like sand in the wind. Kaio pulled me closer, and I clung to him as if my life depended on it. It was wrong, but it felt good. Too good. The taste of whiskey was still in his mouth, mixed with something that was uniquely his. Intense, strong, addictive. My hands went up to his messy hair, and a shiver ran down my skin when I felt his fingers tighten their grip on my waist. That wasn't a soft kiss. It wasn't a hesitant touch of someone trying something new. It was a collision, a clash between two hurricanes that had always spun in opposite directions, but that, somehow, had met on the same path. Kaio lifted me effortlessly onto his lap and sat me on the kitchen table. Our mouths didn't separate for even a second. The need to touch each other, to feel each other, was stronger than any reason. "This is crazy," I whispered between one kiss and the next, my breath coming in short gasps. He slid his lips down my neck and lightly bit the sensitive skin, making me gasp, then go crazy with me. I closed my eyes, lost in the sensation. It was hot. It was wrong. It was everything I would never admit I wanted. But before we could go any further, the doorbell rang. We froze. Kaio's breathing was heavy against my skin. His chest rose and fell quickly, as if he was fighting the same internal battle as me. The doorbell rang again. "Shit," he grumbled, closing his eyes for a second, clearly frustrated. I took that as a sign that I needed to regain control. I quickly got off the table, adjusting my clothes and trying to ignore the fact that my legs were still shaking. Kaio ran his hand through his hair, took a deep breath and stepped away, giving me space. His gaze, however, was still burning. I went to the door and opened it, trying not to look completely disoriented. My mother was standing there, a satisfied smile on her face. "Look," It seems like I caught you two in an intimate moment." My eyes widened. "What? No, of course not." Kayo, the bastard, just smirked. "Hi, mother-in-law." My mother laughed and came in, looking around the apartment as if she was already imagining the grandchildren she would have. "It's good to see that you're getting along. That makes everything easier." "Makes it easier what?" I asked, suspicious. She sat on the couch and crossed her legs, assuming her posture of an experienced negotiator. "The wedding, of course." My throat went dry. "The wedding that will only happen on paper." She smiled in a way that made me feel a shiver down my spine. "Change of plans." Kayo and I exchanged a look. "What do you mean, change of plans?" he asked. "Well, after the photos that went viral, the press became obsessed with you. Couple who hated each other and now loves each other? That's gold. And investors love stories like that. So instead of a low-key wedding, we want something grand." "What?" My voice came out shrill. "A real ceremony, with guests, media, everything a couple in love deserves." My head spun. "Mom, that's absurd." She sighed. "Honey, you know how it works. Your father needs this. Our company needs this. It's just a show." My fists clenched. I hated it when she talked like that, as if my life was a play she could direct. "I need to think." "You have a week." She stood up and kissed my forehead. "I trust you." And then, as if she had just announced the mood of the day, my mother simply left. We were silent for a few seconds, processing this, until Kayo sighed and threw himself on the couch. "I think we're going to have to rehearse a kiss for the altar." I glared at him. "Shut up." He laughed, but deep down, I knew this was far from funny. I needed to get out of there. My head was a mess. The kiss, my mother, the wedding that had been fake was becoming more and more real. Everything seemed to be spinning out of control, and Kayo was at the center of it. Like a magnet I couldn't push away. I grabbed my bag and left without saying a word. Kayo called me, but I ignored him. If I stayed there for one more second, I would do something stupid, like kissing him again. I drove aimlessly, trying to organize my thoughts. The worst part of it all was that if someone asked me why that wedding bothered me so much, I wouldn't know how to answer. I already knew it was a sham. But then, why did the idea of making it official seem so scary? Kayo's kiss came to my mind like an impossible memory to erase. The heat, the way he pulled me close, as if he wanted to consume me completely, as if I belonged to that moment. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe, for the first time in my life, I didn't know exactly what I wanted. I returned home hours later, exhausted. Kayo was lying on the couch, watching some random show, but his eyes went straight to me the moment I walked in. "I thought you had fled to another country." I threw my bag on the table and rolled my eyes. Not a bad idea. He laughed, but there was something different in the way he looked at me, like he was waiting for me to say something important, something he didn't want to ask directly. I sighed and sat on the couch, far enough away to keep a safe distance. I don't know what to do. He turned off the TV. Me neither. We stared at each other for a moment. He seemed as lost as I was, and that was scary. Because Kayo always had answers for everything. He was always one step ahead. But right there, at that moment, we were exactly at the same point. "Let's look at this as a contract," he said finally. "A deal." I let out a humorless laugh. "A contract where you have to kiss me in front of hundreds of people." He gave me a sideways smile. "Does that bother you? Doesn't it?" He leaned forward a little. resting his elbows on his knees. If I said yes, I'd be lying. My heart skipped a beat inside my chest. Kaio, let's rehearse. I blinked, surprised. What? He shrugged. If we're going to have to kiss at the altar, we better make sure it doesn't look forced. I laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. Yeah? Then come here and prove you can fake it without hesitation. He leaned back on the couch, making room for me, challenging me like he had since we were kids. I could have refused. I could have said that I didn't need any rehearsal. But deep down, I wanted to, so I moved closer. My heart was beating so hard that I was sure he could hear it. Kaio didn't move when I got closer. He just looked at me, waiting. Then I touched his face. It was strange at first. My body was tense, my mind screaming that it was wrong, that I should stop before it was too late. But when Kaio wrapped his arms around my waist and pulled me on top of him, all rational thought dissolved. Our lips met, and there was nothing fake about that kiss. It was hot. It was intense. It was dangerous. He explored my mouth calmly, as if he was savoring every second. His hands slid down my back, his fingers pressing against my skin over my shirt. A shiver ran down my spine, and I gave in without thinking. My hands went to his hair, pulling lightly, and he let out a low moan against my mouth. The sound was like a blow straight to my stomach. It was real. It wasn't a rehearsal. When we pulled apart, we were both out of breath. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I understood everything. This marriage wasn't a game. It wasn't a contract, because I wanted Kaio. And the worst part, I knew he wanted me too. I wanted to run away. I wanted to run, lock myself in the room and pretend none of this was happening. Pretend my heart wasn't racing, that my skin wasn't burning where Kaio's hands had touched me, that my mouth wasn't tingling from the kiss we shared. But I couldn't move. Kaio couldn't either. He just stood there, looking at me, breathing heavily, as if he was fighting something inside him. And then he broke the silence. This isn't a game for you, is it? I swallowed hard. What? He ran his tongue over his lips, and my eyes followed the movement without me being able to help it. You felt it. My throat went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. Kaio let out a low laugh, as if he knew I was lying. Oh, you do. I should deny it. I should say that it didn't mean anything, that it was just a rehearsal, that I was just trying to make this marriage seem convincing. But the truth was there, pulsing in the air between us, too strong to ignore. Because at that moment, I couldn't think of anything other than the taste of his mouth. Kaio stood up slowly, and I took a step back without realizing it. What is it? He teased, a smirk appearing on his lips. Afraid? I rolled my eyes, trying to regain control. I was never afraid of you. Number, he nodded. But you are afraid of what you feel now. My stomach turned. You are very conceited, and you are very stubborn. He took another step toward me, and I felt my breath catch. His scent enveloped me, a mix of woody perfume and repressed desire. I could run away, but I stayed. Kaio raised one of his hands and traced a slow path down my arm, as if he were testing me, as if he expected me to push him away. But I didn't. My body reacted to him as if it were natural, as if it were inevitable. You know what I think, he whispered, his voice too hoarse, too dangerous. I could barely breathe. What? He slid his fingers to the back of my neck, holding it firmly. That you always wanted to hate me. My heart skipped a beat. And I always wanted to hate you. The closeness between us became unbearable. I could feel the heat of his body, the electricity in the air, the desire growing like a storm about to break. But now, he continued, his mouth hovering inches from mine, I'm not so sure. My hands gripped the hem of his shirt before I realized what I was doing. I wanted to push him. I wanted to pull him. Let me go, Kaio, he smiled. Better lie, princess. And then he kissed me. This time, there was no hesitation. It wasn't a rehearsal. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a bet. It was hunger. A hunger that came from years of teasing, of fighting, of hurt pride, of unresolved tension. It was hot, desperate, as if we both knew that crossing that line would mean there would be no going back. And the moment I found myself against the wall, Kaio's hands exploring every curve of my body, I knew. I didn't want to go back. I never did. Maybe, deep down, I always belonged to him. I never knew what it meant to lose control until that moment. Kaio pinned me against the wall as if I were his, as if I had always been. His body pressed against mine, his mouth hot, his hands roaming every inch of skin they could find. And me? I didn't want to escape. For the first time, I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to push him away. I didn't want to prove that I was in control of the situation. Because I wasn't. I didn't want to think. I didn't want to remember the fake marriage, the hatred, the years of fighting. All that mattered was the way he made me feel. The heat, the shivers, the desire burning between us like an uncontrollable fire. So when Kaio lifted me in his arms and carried me to the bedroom, I couldn't resist. When he whispered my name between breathless kisses, I didn't hesitate. And when we gave ourselves to each other, there was no falsehood, no acting, just the two of us, stripped of pride and lies, surrendered to a desire that had always been there, hidden under the mask of hate. And it was there, amidst the chaos that we were together, that I understood. I didn't hate him. Maybe I never hated him. Maybe, all along, I had just been fighting against something that was already written. The morning came too quickly. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the room in golden tones. And I, lying there, with my breathing still heavy, and my body marked by Kaio's touch, realized that nothing would be the same, because there was no going back. The bed beside me was empty. I sat up slowly, feeling every part of my body still sensitive from the events of the previous night. My heart was pounding, and reality began to hit me. I had slept with him. The fake marriage. The act. What did that mean now? The bedroom door opened and Kaio walked in with a cup of coffee in his hand, wearing only sweatpants, his hair messy and a lazy smile on his lips. My chest tightened, because for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine that this was real, that we were a real couple. "Good morning, princess," he said, his voice hoarse, full of meaning. I took a deep breath. "What are we doing, Kaio?" He didn't seem surprised by the question. He walked over to me, sat on the edge of the bed and handed me the coffee. "That doesn't change anything, if that's what you want to know." Something inside me sank. "It doesn't change?" Kaio grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. His dark eyes were intense, serious. "Do you want me to change?" My throat went dry. Did I? Because if I said yes, there would be no more masks. There would be no more excuses. He was waiting for my answer, but I didn't know what to say. Then he smiled lightly and ran his thumb over my lips. "We're getting married today." The weight of those words hit me like a punch. It was today, our wedding, a fake one. I clutched the sheets between my fingers, feeling the panic growing. And then what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid his hand to the back of my neck and pulled me into a slow kiss, unlike any other. A kiss that felt like a request, a promise, a warning. When he pulled away, his eyes were filled with something I couldn't decipher. Afterwards, you decide. And he left the room. The hours passed quickly. The white dress was hanging in the room. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I should have been calm. It was a theater, a performance, an agreement. So why was I shaking? My mother entered the room with an emotional smile, her eyes shining. "You look so beautiful," she sighed, looking at me as if I were a real bride. I swallowed hard. "Mom." She took my hand, squeezing it lightly. "Honey, I know this marriage didn't start in the traditional way." My breath caught in my throat. "But I see the way he looks at you." My eyes widened. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "With love." My stomach sank. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this was all just a contract. But the truth, I didn't know what was real or not anymore. The church was packed. Kaio was waiting for me at the altar, dressed in black, his gaze fixed on me. Every step I took towards him felt like a step into the unknown. My mind screamed that this was all madness. But my heart said something else. I stood before him, my hands trembling. The priest began the ceremony, and then came the question. The question that should have been just a formality. Do you accept, of your own free will, to marry Kaio? My heart was pounding. My mouth was dry. It was a lie. It was a contract. But then I looked into his eyes, and I saw something there. Something that made me realize that maybe this had never been a sham. Kaio squeezed my hand lightly. It was my choice, my decision. I took a deep breath and smiled. Yes,